"Here am I, send me." These 5 simple words changed everything. Spoken by a man overwhelmed by his own inadequacy, they marked the start of a journey that would shake kingdoms and offer hope to generations. In this video, we'll dive into the life of Isaiah, exploring how his bold response to God's call led him to confront kings, challenge injustice, and paint vivid pictures of a future Messiah. Get ready to discover how one man's yes to God can ripple through history. Picture a man standing in the presence of ultimate holiness, overwhelmed by his own inadequacy. This was Isaiah, son of Amoz, living in Jerusalem around 740 BCE. Judah was experiencing a period of relative prosperity under King Uzziah's reign, but beneath the surface, society was riddled with corruption and spiritual decay. On an ordinary day, Isaiah entered the temple in Jerusalem. What happened next was anything but ordinary. The room suddenly filled with smoke, and Isaiah saw a vision of God seated on a lofty throne. The hem of God's robe filled the entire temple. Surrounding the throne were seraphim, magnificent angelic beings with 6 wings. They called out to one another, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory." The contrast between divine glory and human frailty couldn't have been starker. As Isaiah stood there, the foundations of the temple shook, and he was acutely aware of his own unworthiness. "Woe to me," he cried out, "I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty." The physical and emotional impact of this encounter was profound. Isaiah felt utterly exposed, his flaws and imperfections laid bare before the perfect holiness of God. It was as if every sin, every shortcoming, every moment of doubt was illuminated in the brilliant light of divine presence. In the history of prophetic calls, such divine visions often marked a turning point. They served to authenticate the prophet's message and provide a deep personal experience of God's reality. For Isaiah, this vision would become the foundation of his entire ministry, shaping his understanding of God's character and expectations for his people. As Isaiah trembled before the throne, one of the seraphim flew to him with a live coal from the altar. The angel touched Isaiah's lips with the coal, saying, "See, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away and your sin atoned for." This act of purification prepared Isaiah for what came next. Then Isaiah heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" The air was thick with anticipation. Would Isaiah, now cleansed and standing in the presence of the Almighty, accept this divine commission? In a moment that would echo through history, Isaiah responded, "Here am I, send me." These words marked a profound transformation. The man who moments ago had been crushed by his own unworthiness now stood ready to be God's messenger. As the vision faded and Isaiah found himself back in the familiar surroundings of the temple, he knew nothing would ever be the same. The challenges that awaited this newly commissioned prophet were immense. He would face resistance, ridicule, and danger. But the memory of that glorious vision would sustain him through the difficult years ahead, as he took on the mantle of God's spokesperson to a nation in need of repentance and renewal. Isaiah's encounter with the divine left him transformed, but the true test of his calling was yet to come. What if the words God gave him to speak were so heavy they could crush a nation? As Isaiah stepped into his role as prophet, he would soon discover that being God's messenger came at a price few were willing to pay. The nature of Isaiah's first prophetic messages was far from the comforting words of hope he might have expected. Instead, God tasked him with delivering a stark warning to the people of Judah. The contrast between the exhilaration of his divine calling and the harsh reality of his initial prophecies was jarring. Isaiah found himself confronting deeply entrenched societal issues that had taken root in Judah. Idolatry was rampant, with the prophet observing that the land was full of idols and people were bowing down to the work of their own hands. This spiritual unfaithfulness, Isaiah warned, would lead to their downfall. Social injustice was another pressing concern. The wealthy were exploiting the poor, and the leaders of Judah were complicit in this oppression. Isaiah's words cut to the heart of the matter. "What do you mean by crushing my people and grinding the faces of the poor?" He called on those in power to treat others with justice and kindness, a message that was sure to ruffle feathers among the elite. To convey God's disappointment, Isaiah employed vivid imagery and poetic language that would leave a lasting impact on his audience. One of his most powerful metaphors likened Judah to a vineyard carefully tended by God, only to yield sour grapes instead of the good fruit he expected. This imagery served to illustrate the consequences of the nation's actions in a way that was both beautiful and haunting. As Isaiah delivered these challenging messages, tension built among the people. How would they respond to such uncomfortable truths? The prophet likely knew that his words would not be well received, yet he pressed on, driven by his divine commission. The resistance Isaiah faced was fierce. The people of Judah, accustomed to hearing pleasant things, recoiled at his prophecies of judgment. They went so far as to say to the seers, "See no more visions," and to the prophets, "Give us no more visions of what is right." This rejection was precisely what God had warned Isaiah about at the outset of his ministry, that the people would hear but not understand, and see but not perceive. Despite the pushback, Isaiah remained steadfast in his mission. The weight of his divine words was indeed heavy, capable of shaking the foundations of nations. Yet it was a burden he had willingly accepted when he responded to God's call with, "Here am I, send me." As Isaiah's reputation grew, so did the scope of his prophecies. Soon he would find himself face to face with the political powers of his time, challenging kings and offering counsel that would shape the course of history. The stage was set for Isaiah to become not just a voice crying out in Jerusalem, but a prophet whose words would echo through the corridors of power and across the centuries. Picture this. A humble prophet stands before the most powerful men in the land, armed with nothing but the words of God. The nation teeters on the brink of war, and the king's next move could seal their fate. What happens when divine wisdom clashes with political ambition? Isaiah's prophetic ministry took a dramatic turn as he found himself face to face with the rulers of Judah. His interactions with Kings Ahaz and Hezekiah would test his resolve and shape the course of the nation's history. The political landscape was tense, with Judah caught in the crosshairs of regional powers. The Syro-Ephraimite War thrust Isaiah into the center of a major crisis. King Ahaz of Judah faced a formidable threat from a coalition formed by Israel, Ephraim, and Syria. These neighboring kingdoms sought to dethrone Ahaz, placing Judah in a precarious position. As fear gripped the royal court, Isaiah received a divine message for the king. God sent Isaiah to counsel Ahaz, urging him to remain calm and trust in divine protection rather than seeking alliances with other nations. The prophet's advice was unpopular and ran counter to conventional political wisdom. Isaiah told Ahaz not to fear the two smoldering stubs of firewood threatening Judah, assuring him that their plans would come to nothing. Isaiah's struggle to convince Ahaz to trust in God rather than human alliances was intense. The king was inclined to seek help from the powerful Assyrian Empire, a move that Isaiah strongly opposed. The prophet's insistence on faith over political maneuvering put him at odds with the royal advisors and challenged the king's own instincts for self-preservation. In this context, Isaiah delivered one of his most famous prophecies, the Emmanuel prophecy. He declared to Ahaz, The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and will call him Emmanuel. This sign was meant to reassure the king of God's presence and protection during Judah's time of distress. The name Emmanuel, meaning God with us, encapsulated Isaiah's message that trust in God was the nation's true security. As Isaiah's political involvement deepened, the stakes grew higher. Would the king heed the prophet's counsel, or would he choose the path of human alliances? The outcome of this decision would have far-reaching consequences for Judah and the surrounding nations. Despite Isaiah's warnings, King Ahaz initially rejected the prophet's advice. He chose to align Judah with Assyria, setting in motion a chain of events that would prove Isaiah's prophecies correct. The short-term relief gained from this alliance would eventually lead to long-term problems for Judah, just as Isaiah had foretold. Isaiah's role in the royal court didn't end with Ahaz. His interactions with King Hezekiah, Ahaz's son, would further demonstrate the prophet's unwavering commitment to God's messages, even when they challenged the highest authorities in the land. As Isaiah's influence extended beyond the borders of Judah, his prophecies began to address the fates of surrounding nations and empires, revealing a divine plan that encompassed the entire known world. As Isaiah's prophetic gaze turned outward, he unveiled a tapestry of divine judgment that spanned continents and centuries. What did this humble man from Jerusalem see in the destiny of the world's mightiest empires? Isaiah's oracles concerning foreign nations marked a significant expansion of his prophetic ministry. While his earlier messages focused primarily on Judah and Israel, he now spoke with authority about the fate of major powers like Babylon, Egypt, and Assyria. These prophecies were remarkably specific, yet their scope was vast, encompassing lands far beyond Judah's borders and extending into a distant future. In one of his most striking prophecies, Isaiah spoke against Babylon, the emerging superpower of his day. "See, the Lord rides on a swift cloud and is coming to Egypt," he proclaimed, painting a vivid picture of divine judgment. "The idols of Egypt tremble before him, and the hearts of the Egyptians melt with fear." This oracle not only addressed Egypt's immediate political situation, but also pointed to a fundamental theological truth. No nation, regardless of its might, was beyond God's reach. Isaiah's words concerning Assyria were particularly poignant, given the immediate threat this empire posed to Judah. While acknowledging Assyria's terrifying strength, Isaiah insisted that they were ultimately just a tool in God's hands, to be discarded when their purpose was fulfilled. This message offered both warning and comfort to his listeners, reminding them that even the most fearsome earthly powers were subject to divine authority. The theological implications of these international prophecies were profound. They portrayed God not as a local deity concerned only with Israel, but as the sovereign ruler over all nations. This concept reached its zenith in Isaiah's stunning declaration about Cyrus, the future Persian king. "This is what the Lord says to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I take hold of to subdue nations before him." The idea that God could use even a foreign pagan ruler to accomplish his purposes challenged conventional understanding and expanded the horizons of divine action. As Isaiah's prophecies spread, they likely stirred a mix of skepticism and anticipation. How could this man from Jerusalem speak with such certainty about the fate of distant empires? Would these grand visions of international upheaval actually come to pass? History would indeed bear witness to the fulfillment of many of Isaiah's prophecies. Babylon, the great power of his day, eventually fell to the Persians, just as he had foreseen. Egypt's influence waned, and Assyria's fearsome might was broken. While the specific details and timelines of these events would be debated by scholars for centuries, the broad strokes of Isaiah's international visions proved remarkably prescient. Yet even as Isaiah spoke of judgment against the nations, threads of hope began to weave through his message. His visions weren't solely about destruction, they pointed towards a future where God's justice and peace would reign supreme. As the prophet's gaze turned from the rise and fall of empires to the promise of restoration, a new chapter in his ministry was about to unfold. In the midst of dire warnings and impending doom, Isaiah began to speak of an unexpected future. How could a humble shoot springing from a dead stump become the key to universal peace? The answer would redefine hope for generations to come. As Isaiah's prophetic ministry unfolded, a remarkable shift occurred. While his earlier messages focused heavily on judgment and divine disappointment, a new thread of hope began to weave through his words. These prophecies of restoration stood in stark contrast to the surrounding context of impending doom, offering a lifeline to a people facing uncertain times. At the heart of Isaiah's hopeful visions was the promise of a future messianic ruler. The prophet spoke of a shoot that would emerge from the stump of Jesse, a descendant of David who would embody divine wisdom and justice. This figure would be empowered by the Spirit of the Lord, possessing unparalleled understanding and might. The image of new life, springing from what appeared dead, served as a powerful metaphor for the restoration God promised. Perhaps most striking was Isaiah's depiction of a peaceable kingdom that would accompany this ruler's reign. He painted a picture so radical, it challenged the very laws of nature. Wolves living with lambs, leopards lying down with goats, and young children leading lions. This vision went far beyond mere political stability, hinting at a fundamental transformation of creation itself. It offered a glimpse of a world where fear and violence would be replaced by harmony and trust. Amidst these grand visions, Isaiah introduced the crucial concept of the remnant. Even as he spoke of widespread judgment, he assured his listeners that God would preserve a faithful few. Like the stump of a felled tree that retains the potential for new growth, this remnant would serve as the seed of future restoration. It was a message of hope tempered with sobriety, acknowledging the reality of coming hardships while affirming God's ultimate plan for renewal. Isaiah's prophecies of hope extended beyond the borders of Judah. He spoke of a magnificent feast prepared by God for all peoples, where death itself would be swallowed up forever. This vision of abundance and joy served as a powerful counterpoint to the scarcity and sorrow that often marked daily life in ancient Judah. The impact of these hopeful messages was profound. In times of national crisis, when enemies threatened and exile loomed, Isaiah's words offered a lifeline of divine assurance. They reminded the people that their current circumstances, however dire, were not the end of the story. God's plan for restoration encompassed not just external circumstances, but also promised a deep spiritual renewal with God's Spirit poured out upon future generations. As Isaiah's ministry progressed, his messages of hope would take on an even more intriguing form. The prophet began to speak of a mysterious figure, a servant who would bear the weight of the world's suffering. This enigmatic character would introduce a new dimension to Isaiah's vision of restoration, challenging conventional understanding and pointing towards a future that would reshape the foundations of faith itself. Imagine a hero whose greatest strength lies in their willingness to endure unimaginable pain. Isaiah's writings introduce us to just such a figure, the suffering servant. But who is this mysterious character, and why has their identity captivated scholars and believers for millennia? As Isaiah's prophecies unfolded, a series of passages emerged that painted a portrait of a figure unlike any other in biblical literature. Known as the servant songs, these sections of Isaiah, particularly in chapters 42, 49, 50, and 53, depict a servant of God who would bear the weight of others' suffering and bring about justice and healing through their own anguish. The apparent contradiction at the heart of this figure is striking. How could someone destined for greatness also be marked for intense suffering? This paradox has puzzled readers for centuries and sparked endless debate about the servant's true identity and purpose. The first servant song introduces us to this enigmatic character. Isaiah 42 speaks of one chosen by God who will bring justice to the nations without faltering or being discouraged. This servant is portrayed as gentle yet determined, a stark contrast to the typical image of a powerful leader. As we move through the subsequent songs, the servant's mission expands. Isaiah 49 describes the servant as a light to the Gentiles, suggesting a universal scope to their work that extends far beyond the borders of Israel. The third song in Isaiah 50 presents a servant who is obedient and resilient in the face of persecution, setting the stage for the most vivid and controversial passage. The fourth servant song, found in Isaiah 53, presents a haunting image of suffering. The servant is described as one who took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet was considered punished by God, stricken by him, and afflicted. This visceral depiction of anguish endured for the sake of others has captivated readers for generations. Throughout history, interpretations of the suffering servant's identity have varied widely. Some ancient Jewish interpretations saw the servant as a representation of Israel itself, bearing suffering on behalf of the nations. Others viewed the servant as a future messianic figure. Christian tradition has long associated the suffering servant with Jesus Christ, seeing in these passages a prophetic foreshadowing of his life and crucifixion. The theological implications of the suffering servant concept are profound. It introduces the idea that redemption and healing can come through voluntary suffering, challenging conventional notions of power and victory. This servant turns the world's understanding of strength on its head, achieving triumph through apparent defeat. The impact of the suffering servant passages extends far beyond biblical scholarship. They have influenced literature, art, and social movements, inspiring those who seek to bring about change through self-sacrifice and non-violent resistance. As Isaiah's prophecies continued to unfold, the enigma of the suffering servant would remain a central theme, intertwining with messages of hope and restoration for a people facing exile and uncertainty. The servant's willingness to bear the burdens of others would become a powerful symbol of God's love and commitment to his people, even in their darkest hours. As the people of Judah faced their darkest hour, a new voice emerged from the shadows of Isaiah's prophecies. What could possibly bring hope to a nation torn from its homeland and thrust into the heart of a foreign empire? The year was 586 BCE, and Jerusalem lay in ruins. The Babylonians had destroyed the city, razed the temple to the ground, and forced many Judeans into exile. This catastrophic event shattered their world, leaving them grappling with questions of identity, faith, and survival in a strange land. It was in this context of despair that a section of Isaiah's prophecies, often referred to as Deutero-Isaiah, took on profound significance. These words, whether written by Isaiah himself or a later prophet in his tradition, spoke directly to the exile's pain and offered a lifeline of hope. The messages in this latter part of Isaiah represented a remarkable shift in tone and focus. Instead of warnings and judgment, they overflowed with comfort and assurance. "Comfort, comfort my people," the prophet declared. "Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and proclaim to her that her hard service has been completed, that her sin has been paid for." These words didn't just acknowledge the exile's suffering, they reframed it within God's larger plan. The prophet assured them that their time in Babylon wasn't abandonment, but a period of refinement. He reminded them of God's enduring love, proclaiming, "I have summoned you by name. You are mine." The imagery used by Isaiah was particularly powerful for a displaced people. He depicted God as a shepherd, tenderly gathering lambs in his arms, a poignant metaphor of care and guidance for those who felt lost and vulnerable. This personal, intimate portrayal of God's relationship with his people offered solace in their darkest moments. But Isaiah's messages went beyond mere comfort. They sparked a profound theological development among the exiles. Surrounded by Babylon's polytheistic culture, the prophet's words crystallized a commitment to monotheism. "I am the first and I am the last," God declares through Isaiah. "Apart from me, there is no God." This unequivocal statement helped solidify Jewish identity in the face of foreign influences. Moreover, Isaiah's prophecies began to hint at a universal scope for God's plan. The exile's return wasn't just about restoring Judah. It was part of God's intention to bless all nations. This expanding vision challenged the exiles to see their role in a greater divine purpose. Perhaps most incredibly, Isaiah's words painted vivid pictures of a future beyond their current suffering. He spoke of a restored Jerusalem, of joy replacing sorrow, and of a new creation where the former things will not be remembered. These promises of renewal sustained hope when tangible evidence for optimism was scarce. The impact of these messages on the exiled community was profound. They found strength to maintain their faith and cultural practices in a foreign land. Isaiah's words became a touchstone, reminding them of God's faithfulness and their own identity as his chosen people. Even as they wept by the rivers of Babylon, these prophecies kept alive the dream of return and restoration. Isaiah's prophecies sustained the exiles in Babylon, but their impact didn't end there. Words spoken over 2,700 years ago are still shaping our world today. From social movements to global peace efforts, Isaiah's voice continues to echo, challenging us to reconsider our assumptions about ancient wisdom in the modern age. The enduring impact of Isaiah's prophecies is remarkable, given the vast distance between his ancient context and our contemporary world. Yet his themes of justice, hope, and divine intervention continue to resonate across religious and secular spheres. In Judaism and Christianity, Isaiah's writings are foundational texts, often interpreted as articulating core theological concepts and moral imperatives. Christian traditions in particular have found deep significance in Isaiah's prophecies. Many interpret passages like the suffering servant and the Emmanuel prophecy as foreshadowing the coming of Jesus Christ. This reading has profoundly influenced Christian theology and worship practices for centuries. Beyond religious circles, Isaiah's vivid imagery has left an indelible mark on art and literature. His vision of a peaceable kingdom where natural enemies coexist in harmony has inspired countless works. Artists and writers have long been drawn to this powerful symbol of hope and divine restoration, using it to explore themes of reconciliation and peace in both religious and secular contexts. Isaiah's calls for social justice and care for the marginalized have found new life in modern social movements. His passionate pleas for equity and compassion towards the oppressed continue to inspire advocates working for social change. These ancient words have become rallying cries for those seeking to build more just and equitable societies. The prophet's poetic imagery has also taken on new meanings in contemporary discussions of spiritual and personal renewal. Isaiah's depiction of deserts blooming into lush landscapes serves as a powerful metaphor for transformation and hope. This imagery resonates with many who seek meaning and renewal in their lives, regardless of their religious background. On the global stage, Isaiah's prophetic voice echoes in discussions of international peace and reconciliation. His call for nations to turn away from conflict and seek justice continues to inspire efforts at diplomacy and peace-building. In a world often marked by division and strife, Isaiah's vision of a harmonious future remains a powerful ideal. As we grapple with complex global challenges, Isaiah's words offer both comfort and challenge. They remind us of the possibility of positive change, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles. At the same time, they call us to account, urging us to work actively for justice and peace in our communities and beyond. The enduring relevance of Isaiah's prophecies raises intriguing questions about the nature of wisdom and truth. How can words spoken so long ago continue to speak to our modern condition? As we ponder this mystery, we're led to consider the tangible evidence for Isaiah's historical existence. What physical traces remain of this influential prophet, and what can they tell us about the man behind these timeless words? For centuries, Isaiah's words have echoed through time, but his physical presence remained elusive. That is, until a remarkable find in Jerusalem sparked a debate that would shake the foundations of biblical archaeology. What does this discovery reveal about the man behind the prophecies, and how does it change our understanding of ancient wisdom? The quest to unearth tangible evidence of Isaiah's existence has long captivated archaeologists and biblical scholars. Yet this search faces significant challenges. Unlike kings or military leaders who often left behind grand monuments, prophets like Isaiah typically lived more humble lives, leaving fewer material traces. The passage of time, destruction of ancient sites, and scarcity of written records from the 8th century BCE further complicate efforts to find concrete proof of biblical figures. Despite these obstacles, recent archaeological discoveries have brought us closer to the historical Isaiah than ever before. The most significant of these finds is the Isaiah bulla, a small clay seal impression unearthed in Jerusalem. This thumb-sized artifact bears an inscription that reads, "Isaiah, son of Amoz," potentially referring to the biblical prophet himself. The discovery of this bulla has ignited scholarly debates about its authenticity and implications for our understanding of Isaiah's historical reality. The Isaiah bulla isn't just significant for confirming the prophet's existence, it also provides valuable insights into the context of his ministry. The seal's discovery in Jerusalem underscores the city's importance as a center of prophetic activity during the 8th century BCE. This was a time of political turmoil and social injustice, precisely the issues Isaiah addressed in his prophecies. The physical proximity of this artifact to other finds from the same period helps paint a more vivid picture of the world Isaiah inhabited. However, archaeologists caution against over-reliance on single artifacts to validate scriptural accounts. The Isaiah bulla has sparked debates about the intersection of faith and historical evidence. Some scholars argue that such findings lend credibility to the biblical narrative, while others emphasize the need for multiple lines of evidence before drawing firm conclusions. Beyond the Isaiah bulla, other archaeological methods have helped illuminate Isaiah's historical context. Techniques like stratigraphy, which analyzes layers of soil and artifacts, and radiocarbon dating have allowed researchers to establish timelines of human activity that correspond with the biblical account. The study of pottery types and comparative analysis of inscriptions from the period have also provided valuable context for understanding the world in which Isaiah lived and prophesied. These archaeological discoveries don't just confirm dates and places, they offer glimpses into the human experience of figures like Isaiah. They remind us that behind the powerful words we read in Scripture were real people grappling with real challenges. The Isaiah bulla, for instance, brings us face to face with the physical object the prophet might have used to authenticate his writings, bridging the gap between ancient text and tangible reality. As we uncover more about Isaiah's historical context, we're led to consider the literary brilliance of his prophecies. How did this man, rooted in a specific time and place, produce words that would resonate across millennia? The answer lies in exploring the poetic power and timeless themes woven throughout Isaiah's writings. Isaiah's prophecies contain a surprising element that sets them apart from typical religious texts. Have you ever wondered how a message of judgment and hope could be conveyed through intricate literary devices? The answer lies in Isaiah's masterful use of language, which transforms his divine revelations into unforgettable verses that resonate across cultures and generations. While many envision prophets as stern figures shouting dire warnings, Isaiah's words paint a different picture entirely. His prophecies are crafted with a poetic sophistication that rivals the finest literature of the ancient Near East. This literary prowess sets Isaiah apart from many of his contemporaries, elevating his messages through the power of carefully chosen words and vivid imagery. At the heart of Isaiah's poetic style is his masterful use of metaphor and symbolism. One of his most striking images likens Judah to a carefully tended vineyard that yields only sour grapes. This powerful metaphor not only captures God's disappointment, but also illustrates the consequences of the nation's actions in a way that is both beautiful and haunting. Such imagery serves a dual purpose, enhancing the emotional impact of Isaiah's words while making complex theological concepts more accessible to his audience. Isaiah's use of poetic structures goes beyond mere aesthetics. He employs techniques like parallelism, alliteration, and chiasmus to reinforce his theological messages. For example, in Isaiah 41:2, the repetition of the word comfort emphasizes God's desire to console his people. This duality of judgment and hope, so central to Isaiah's prophecies, is often reflected in the very structure of his language. The prophet's literary artistry is particularly evident in his ability to weave complex theological concepts into accessible language. By blending narrative, poetry, and exhortation, Isaiah creates a multifaceted approach to communication that engages his audience on multiple levels. This sophisticated use of language allows him to address profound truths in ways that resonate deeply with listeners across time and culture. Isaiah's influence extends far beyond his immediate context. His themes of justice, hope, and divine sovereignty have echoed through centuries of literature, both religious and secular. The vivid imagery of peace in Isaiah 11:6-9, where natural enemies coexist harmoniously, has inspired countless artists and writers to explore visions of ultimate restoration and reconciliation. As we delve deeper into Isaiah's prophecies, we begin to see how his poetic power serves as a vehicle for groundbreaking theological ideas. His words don't just describe a relationship with the divine, they invite readers into a transformative encounter. This raises an intriguing question. How did Isaiah's unique literary style contribute to the development of new religious concepts that would shape the course of monotheistic faith? While Isaiah's literary style captivated audiences, it was the content of his message that truly shook the ancient world. Imagine a time when the very nature of divinity was understood completely differently. Now picture one man's vision turning that entire concept on its head. What revolutionary ideas did Isaiah introduce that would forever change the course of religious thought? Isaiah's prophecies introduced radical theological concepts that stood in stark contrast to the prevailing beliefs of his time. In an era when polytheism dominated the religious landscape of the ancient Near East, Isaiah's unwavering emphasis on a single, sovereign God was revolutionary. His writings repeatedly affirmed the exclusive divinity of Yahweh, challenging the accepted notion of multiple deities governing different aspects of life. This shift towards monotheism was not merely a numerical reduction of gods. Isaiah portrayed God as a deeply personal and relational being, intimately involved in human affairs. Unlike the often distant and capricious deities of surrounding cultures, Isaiah's God desired justice, righteousness, and a genuine relationship with his people. This portrayal set a new standard for understanding divine character and humanity's place in the cosmic order. One of Isaiah's most groundbreaking contributions was his emphasis on social justice as an integral part of true worship. In a time when religious observance often focused primarily on ritual sacrifices, Isaiah argued that God desired a community that cared for the vulnerable. His call in Isaiah 1:16-17 to learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless, plead the case of the widow, represented a radical reimagining of what it meant to be faithful to God. Isaiah's concept of a remnant introduced a hopeful perspective on divine judgment that was uncommon in other prophetic traditions. This idea suggested that even in times of widespread unfaithfulness, a small group would remain true to God and become the seed of future restoration. It offered a nuanced view of divine justice that balanced accountability with hope for renewal. Perhaps one of Isaiah's most far-reaching theological innovations was his vision of universal worship. In a world where deities were often seen as tied to specific nations or territories, Isaiah proclaimed a future where all peoples would come to worship the God of Israel. His declaration in Isaiah 56:7 that God's house would be a house of prayer for all nations hinted at a divine plan that transcended national boundaries. These revolutionary ideas laid the groundwork for major developments in later Jewish and Christian theology. Isaiah's prophecies about a suffering servant and a coming Messiah would profoundly shape expectations of divine intervention and redemption. His vision of a new creation and a new covenant challenged existing paradigms and offered a transformative understanding of God's ultimate plan for humanity. As we grapple with the depth and breadth of Isaiah's theological innovations, we're left to wonder, how have these ancient words continued to shape religious thought across millennia? And what challenges do we face in interpreting these profound yet sometimes enigmatic prophecies for our modern world? Isaiah's prophecies have puzzled readers for millennia. Some passages seem to contradict each other, while others appear to have multiple meanings. But here's a thought that might change everything. What if these apparent contradictions are actually the key to understanding Isaiah's evolving message? Interpreting Isaiah's prophecies is no simple task. The gap between his ancient world and our modern context creates significant challenges. We're dealing with texts written in a different language, culture, and historical setting. What seemed clear to Isaiah's original audience might be obscure or even misleading to us today. Scholars have developed various approaches to tackle these challenges. Historical interpretation seeks to understand Isaiah's words in their original context, examining the political, social, and religious landscape of 8th century BCE Judah. Literary analysis focuses on Isaiah's use of language, metaphor, and poetic structures to convey meaning. Theological interpretation explores how Isaiah's prophecies fit into broader religious frameworks and doctrines. Each of these approaches offers unique insights, but also raises new questions. For example, the historical approach helps us understand why Isaiah's message shifted during King Hezekiah's reign. As Assyrian threats loomed, Isaiah's prophecies evolved from warnings of judgment to more hopeful visions of divine intervention and restoration. This change reflects the dynamic nature of prophecy, responding to changing circumstances while maintaining core themes. Some of Isaiah's most controversial passages center around prophecies that seem to have dual fulfillments. The famous Emmanuel prophecy in Isaiah 7:14 is a prime example. While it had immediate relevance to King Ahaz's situation, Many traditions also interpret it as a long-term prediction of the Messiah. Scholars debate whether such dual meanings were intended by Isaiah or are the result of later interpretations. Another challenge lies in Isaiah's use of vivid imagery and metaphors. While these literary devices enrich the text, they can also complicate interpretation. The servant songs, for instance, have been subject to numerous interpretations throughout history. Is the suffering servant a representation of Israel, a future Messiah, or something else entirely? Despite these challenges, modern scholarship has made significant strides in understanding Isaiah's prophecies. Advances in linguistics, archaeology, and comparative studies of ancient Near Eastern literature have provided new context for interpreting difficult passages. Interdisciplinary approaches that combine historical, literary, and theological perspectives offer a more nuanced understanding of Isaiah's complex messages. As we continue to grapple with Isaiah's words, we're led to consider their relevance beyond academic circles. How do these ancient prophecies speak to the challenges and hopes of our contemporary world? It's a question that bridges the gap between scholarly interpretation and practical application, inviting us to explore how Isaiah's timeless themes might offer wisdom for today's pressing issues. While scholars debate interpretations, Isaiah's message is finding new life beyond academia. In an age of social upheaval and environmental crisis, could an ancient prophet's vision hold the blueprint for a just and sustainable future? Isaiah's words, though penned millennia ago, resonate with striking relevance in our modern world. The prophet's passionate calls for justice and care for the vulnerable echo in contemporary social movements, addressing inequality and oppression. His vision of a world where the wolf will live with the lamb speaks to our deepest longings for peace in an era marked by conflict and division. In religious contexts, Isaiah's messages of hope and restoration continue to offer comfort and inspiration. The prophet's assurance of God's enduring love and commitment to his people provides solace to those facing hardship or uncertainty. Pastoral care often draws on Isaiah's imagery, such as the invitation to "Come, all you who are thirsty," to convey God's open embrace of those seeking spiritual fulfillment. Beyond traditional religious settings, Isaiah's themes find application in unexpected places. Environmental activists draw inspiration from his vision of a restored creation, seeing in it a call to action for sustainability and care for the earth. The prophet's imagery of deserts blooming into lush landscapes serves as a powerful metaphor for transformation, resonating with those seeking personal or societal renewal. In the realm of international relations, Isaiah's prophecies about God's sovereignty over nations challenge leaders and citizens to seek higher guidance in global affairs. His vision of a future where swords are beaten into plowshares continues to inspire peace-building efforts and diplomatic initiatives aimed at resolving conflicts. The enduring power of Isaiah's words lies in their ability to address fundamental human concerns that transcend time and culture. His call for internal renewal and transformation speaks to our ongoing struggle to align our actions with our highest values. The prophet's unwavering hope in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges offers a model of resilience for those working to effect positive change in the world. As we grapple with complex global issues like climate change, economic inequality, and political polarization, Isaiah's vision of a just and peaceful world takes on renewed urgency. His words challenge us to look beyond short-term solutions and consider the long-term implications of our choices for future generations. The continued relevance of Isaiah's prophecies raises intriguing questions about the nature of wisdom and truth. How can ancient words speak so directly to modern crises? Perhaps it is precisely because Isaiah addressed timeless human struggles, the quest for justice, the longing for peace, the hope for renewal. that his message continues to resonate across millennia. As we stand at the crossroads of history, facing unprecedented challenges and opportunities, Isaiah's voice calls us to envision a better world and work tirelessly to bring it into being. His enduring legacy reminds us that true change begins with a transformative vision, one that challenges us to see beyond our current limitations and strive for a future marked by justice, compassion, and hope for all. Isaiah's prophecies continue to resonate across millennia, challenging us to pursue justice, nurture hope, and embrace transformation. His words remind us that true faith extends beyond rituals to encompass care for the vulnerable and a commitment to righteousness. As we face modern challenges, Isaiah's vision calls us to examine our own lives and communities. How might we embody his ideals of justice and compassion? In what ways can we work towards the peaceful world he envisioned? Isaiah's powerful declaration in chapter 61 encapsulates his transformative message. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. This mandate to bring hope to the downtrodden remains as urgent today as it was in ancient Judah. Isaiah's enduring legacy invites us to become agents of positive change in our world.